Title of my presentation for today is The Art of Blending Olfactory Expressions in Japanese Antiquity. As some of you might know, I'm writing my first book, which is a philosophical focus on Japanese olfactory culture. And I'm like kind of halfway. So I'm done with this big second chapter, which is focusing on Nara, let's say in Japanese antiquity. So like in how olfactory substances arrived to Japan, like let's say from the 5th, 6th century, together with Buddhism. So like it was an act of connection, not just with China, with Korea, with the wider Asian continent. And then again, I chose The Art of Blending as a title. First of all, because most of the substances, most of the incense and olfactory and odorants used in this antiquity in Heian, especially, is an act of blending, of physical blending. But then, of course, it's a blending of different specialities, of different temporalities as well. And then it becomes a central moment, as you were quoting the Thousand Plateau. Yes, it's a signature. So it's an actual blending within different subjectivities. It's the creation of shared space for emotion, identity, interpersonal attunement. So expression. So I'm trying to jot down some of my pre-comprehension here. So it seems to be a problematic process, and I want to understand why it's problematic as a metaphor. First of all, it seems to be modeled on speech. That's one of the first things. I mean, when we talk about expression, yes, we, as a close second, we start thinking about gesture and posture and so on. But speech seems to be the main venue that we're using or understanding expression through. And then we add these nonverbal cues and so on. And then one other problem, maybe it emerged, but it's expression seems to be on the verge of voluntary expression. So I'm anegoic, a subjective kind of expression, and then involuntary. I mean, maybe so far as I heard was this subjectless, this impersonal kind of expression. So trying to switch this focus outside of a singular egoic subject. But even within this kind of personal expression, most of what we're expressing, or maybe not most, but an essential part of it is involuntary, maybe unconscious. The last point, I mean, when we talk about expression as a metaphor, it seems to be dividing. So it's to express, Ausdruck, and so on means to push, to squeeze out of something. It's intimate. It's based on a psychic or even bodily interiority. And so my starting point here is that can we think expression even more literally as the word bodily interaction of what is smelling in a transitive or intransitive way. So what is pushed out of us, not just what I'm so everything is expressing itself in the sense it's pushing itself outside of itself. And sensorially, what is actually pushing outside of my body, the part of myself that is constantly emerging and floating around me is my scent, which includes both a natural, an embodied, a spontaneous thing, going beyond my voluntary expression, obviously, but also it means that I can manipulate that, I can communicate with other kind of let's say olfactory ecstasies of different subjects, entities. And trying to blend it, trying to focus on olfactory expression means to me that I have to face first of all the biases and the ideology of let's say Euro-American modernity, which comes from it's really it's based on mostly undiscussed, obvious, and that's very powerful because it's mostly unexpressed ideology of deodorization. So which is the paradoxical and there's paranoid injunction of being odorless. It's levered against both human bodies and life spaces. That's Freudian discussed that as a physiological expression that makes this kind of olfactory communication with the species, with the environment that is central for animal life and sexuality has to be repressed in human beings. So we come loving and needing these olfactory communication, that love has to become hate. So and that's something that feels very natural to us. I mean, like stinking stuff. Seems to be disgusting, but if you look at dogs or other animals, I mean, like that's a really powerful, meaningful, like olfactory expression, and it's like a repressed and reversed in human. And so, like, and historically, I mean, for Freud, this is something happening in a very far mythical past. Like, it happened in the moment in which human beings start working on two legs rather than four. But like historically, it's a bourgeois society, so it's like an 18th or 19th century toilette, which is the again one paradoxical thing. We have to both hide and transfigure human odor, so it has to be erased. So we use like perfumes and soap and so on, but at the same time, it's not just perfuming. And yeah, so like Tada, I mean, among others, had discussed like how scent then becomes connected with otherness. So we associate, like we never, so scent is the other, as in we can never smell ourselves, our body, our home, our city, our country, because out of the traditional five senses, the only one that has a strong, like inherent connection to affection. So let's say within like a first person experience or a third person experience, smell actually is kind of like it's connected to a second person experience. It's the you that I have to deal with. And like in modernity, in Euro-American modernity, then it has been associated to animality, to primitiveness, to like social distinction, especially after the French Revolution, to what's feminine or mad, queer, decadent. And then Oriental, of course. And as I was looking for images, that's as you can see, I mean, it's like I guess like late 19th century soap advertisement. But if we wanted to read like a monkey holding it's a pen, I think, but it's a clean pen. It's held as a mirror. That's this young, very white, girl. And a monkey's holding that. I mean, it's like psychoanalytically, we could discuss it so much. Okay, seems blocked. Okay, so where I'm starting, like recently, Carol Black was at Tohoku University, and she was expressing the necessity and the chance of like starting from somewhere else. So like, I want to discuss about odorants and about like the philosophical value of fashion, not starting from Greece, not starting from Europe, but starting from Japan. Why Japan of all places? Not because of the Orientalist connections, that actually like it's a very strong, like Asia, the Orient, even Japan as a land of perfume, which is a very strong trope in in the second half of the 19th century in Europe. Even though paradoxically Japan is not really producing odorants, I always have to import them. But just because of that, because Japan from its antiquity is a country that had to take odorants from like the rest of Asia. They were arriving from very far away lands. And then they were integrated. They were like literally breathed in and then breathed out as something completely changed that had become integrated with a very dynamic sense of self. So it's a self-food, it's a through affection, the self-food is defined through an interaction with something else. So I think even the Heian period, which is like first strong absorption of Chinese culture, and then an original elaboration. Incense. When we talk about incense, I mean we have of course it's like means just burnt odorant, but like in the East Asian context, like it's actually ginkgo, aloes wood, or agar wood, which is a very interesting substance. I'm gonna like talk more about that. But like incense, aloes wood with other odorants reaches Japan from China and Korea, starting from the 6th century. So like together with Buddhism. And then it switches from the religious faith, from like a Sonaiko or a Kuko to Soradaki, which means, let's say, space burning or also empty burning, free burn. Like I think free burning is actually the best. So like from a religious use and function, it switched to like a more open, free space of lay, but it's still very much part of a ritualized culture. And of course, I mean, it's only available to the few thousand of people in the court. So we're talking about like an aristocratic culture. But then it becomes to like be used freely, and according to recipes, and according to like a free use in different kind of spaces, in different forms of interpersonal attunement. What happens is that these like very precious substances start to be blended according to recipes, and this is called takimono. And so like these things that are gathered like spatially from other places reach Japan with very limited quantities, especially, and then from the 9th century, the Tang dynasty is collapsing in China, and Japan stops, like at least the official commerce with China stops. So for a few centuries, we have like something had been imported, like these like really precious kind of like odorant goods, and they stay in Japan and they start to be mixed with other substances. And these recipes also bear like a strong, they bear a strong mark of like self-expression, of like access to like cultural and physical capital, because the recipes were like hidden, or like they were like family secrets, and even the technique of blending was pretty complex. So we have, like when I'm using the art of blending as a title for this section, of course, I'm like using the blending as a ambiguous word. So like we're talking about like the physical act of blending, but also like blending on different sorts, like with the autochthonous culture and foreign culture. And also like soradaki is meant to be an act of communication. It's an act of expression. So we have between foreign and Japanese, body and space, between self and other. So we can perfume for ourselves, for others, but also as we can see, as we'll see, we can perfume against each other. And one other interesting thing, like when I'm saying between body and space, I mean it because so like whereas in, let's say, in the Mediterranean first and then in modernity, perfuming is mostly meant to be something done on the body. So and then eventually covering, like masking, transmuting body odor. Soradaki is always meant as a between. So like the poo, of course, is also the poo of space. And so what is perfume is mostly ambient. So it's nothing between outdoor and indoor, because obviously these houses have a strong like ventilation, communication with external spaces of the garden, for instance. And a garden that sometimes also has an olfactory imprint. And then even when it comes to the body, it's never the skin, it's never the body as an object, but it's but bodily interfaces. So for instance, like clothing, something perfume, and especially in poetry, it's omnipresent as a trope. The perfume part of the clothing are the sleeves. So especially the very long sleeves that women were wearing become something that is almost the body, something within the body and like social identity or a culture. And then long hair. So there's a beautiful book by Pandej, which is called like Tangled Hair and Perfume and Sleeves. And then she's observing body in Heian literature to realize that it's more a calligraphy in this sense. And yeah, so like why Japan? Why ancient Japan especially? Because it forces me, for me, it's a phenomenological epoche. It like brackets my understanding of time, space, memory, desire, intersubjectivity, because it's a very different culture, not just from modern Europe, but also like even from comparing to modern Japan. And Hans, like he's really like doing some deep thinking with these formless, evanescent presence of olfaction or odorants of perfumes. This? Yes, it's coming. Okay, so when we talk about aloes wood or agarwood, it's a really interesting substance, and it's one of the most expensive substances worldwide. So maybe, I don't know how many of you have the pleasure, but yes, it's an actual pleasure to actually deal with a big chunk of it, because it's rare. It needs to be like looked for. But basically what happens is like Aquilaria malachensis, and it's two kinds it's not even from China. I mean, it's from Cambodia, Vietnam, Laos, Southern India, and like with very different qualities. And aloes wood, so Aquilaria is not originally perfumed. So what happens there is that a piece of wood, like can be like animals or like something happens, like a branch is falling, and then they need to go through some kind of trauma. And so what happens? It could be like animal, it could be like molding. And what happens is when the wood is attacked, it starts secreting like some kind of like deeper oils, deeper resins. It turns dark, as you can see, or with this special marbling. It's much more heavy. It's much heavier, as you can, literally ginkgo means sinking. So it's like it's heavier than water, it doesn't float anymore. And then when heated or burned, it gives away a really unique, it's an extremely complex scent. It's not very strong, but like it's a, and the other thing, I find it like somehow inherently poetic. It's a unique interaction of the plant and its biome. So each different piece of ginkgo has a unique. So of course, like according to region or qualities, we have like macrotypes. From the Muromachi Jidai, we have 6 main origins. The most expensive one is called Kiara, which is from Vietnam. But so ginkgo has a unique tone. So that, for instance, like in Kodo, I'm not discussing about Kodo today, but like the expression uses monko, so it's like people listen to it as they would to a voice. So it has a unique particular quality. Let's say ginkgo is an expressive substance. And then what happens is it's blended. So it's like together with like 11 main odorants, like the main ones are 6, but then some other ones have like a specific function as stabilizer or like to like further complicate it. But basically it's, as you can see, there's a pestle, it's like a mix with some honey or like a molas, or like amazra. And then these is needed, like it's buried for a while, and then it's needed in these little black bowls, which are then heated on like there's a charcoal underneath the ashes in the brazier, in the furrow. And then it gives away like a really interesting, really like finely nuanced odor. See, this is a list of like 11 main odorants. I'm not reading them now. I have a few with me, so maybe after, like you can directly smell them. But then what happens is that in Heian we have there's not just 6 recipes, but there are 6 main recipes. They call Takimono Mukse, and they all have a name. They eventually gather like seasonal association. So each recipe, which is not just one. So like for each of the 6 main kinds, we have different traditions. Again, secret, we're talking about aristocrats, and they are aristocrats with the obsession for refinement. So it's about aesthetic expression. But this aesthetic expression is also like status-based. So like to be a good poet, to be a good calligrapher, to be like an expert in instant blending means to acquire status. And it's really important part of like, let's say, ascending in the like court hierarchy is very much connected to like the expression of like personal refinement and access to cultural and material capital. And as you can see, on the right, I'm collecting, these are a bit shortened, but like eventually Emperor Go-Fushimi, so we're talking about, it's not Heian, I think it's like a Muromachi already. So, but like what happens is that these scents, like with the recipes, so like a public collection of recipes is published by the end of the Heian period by imperial edict. So like the Purui Shusho. So it's a collection of Takimono recipes. So they become, let's say, if not public, at least more accessible. And then we have a description of each one of them. So we have Baika, the spring one, which is similar to the smell of plum blossoms. But what's important, plum blossoms are not one of the ingredients. So we're not talking about like one of the actual ingredients in the smell, but it smells like. So that's of course, we have to deal with metaphoric like expressions for that. And then lotus flowers, and then it gets even more, and then it gets more and more abstract. So the last one, which is supposed to be one of the most precious and finest, the kurobo, the black one, the black direction, which is connected to winter. Black is the color of north in Omyodo, so it's the black turtle. And black is like the cool air of deep winter, a smell that gets deep in the body and reminds of a lost love across the four seasons. So it's the smell, the black is the color of ice, an ice surface in winter. And kurobo is meant to like give out these like general, like synesthetic attunement to our natural space, but also, and then of course, I mean, we're talking about the autumn one, it's like imitating the falling leaves of Momiji, remember the gentle space of Suzuki. And so the Chamberlain in Theatre Autumn instance is like, it's connected to Mono no Aware. So they're all dealing with the metaphoric expression. The seasonal theme allows them to be connected to an editorial rhythm. And then each one of them, of course, is like created through recipes that connected, let's say, to a historical time. So already they are like recipes that follow like noble lineages. And let's see how they were used and like how they were expressed. So we have a beautiful passage from Makurano Soshi, the section of the period book. Things that make your heart beat faster. To wash your hair, apply your makeup, and put on clothes that are well scented with incense. Even if you're somewhere where no one special will see you, you still feel a heady sense of pleasure inside. So it's this first level, I mean, it's meant for somebody. And even, of course, even if nobody sees you, but then the presence of somebody else, and then it's also about waiting for somebody by becoming perfumed. Like it's an incredibly modern description, maybe. But then, I mean, Eileen Kapsen, it's kind of an old study of Takimono, but she's stressing one important fact. People like in the court, in the context that we are analyzing today, people rarely saw each other. Even members of the same sex, if not on close terms, met with a curtain between them. To make matters worse, or better maybe, in the case of romantic conversations, the man might not hear the voice of the woman whom he was courting until the romance reached its later stages. So like these like personalities were like literally hidden from sight, and the whole courtship is about mediation. So for instance, we have like poetic correspondences, which is a mix of calligraphy, but also the perfume in the paper. So like we said hair, we said sleeves. Perfume paper is also like a very, very frequent trope in this literature from in this age. And then one last thing, I mean, like the awase. The awase is like a format with like it's a big general way. It's a general axis of the evolution of like Heian aesthetics and let's say aesthetics at large. So like the artwork. So we have an idea of an artwork as something that's created by one person, the artist, let's say, and then has a fruita that's meant for aesthetic enjoyment, consumption, judgment, and so on. But what happens is like from like Japanese Antiquity, then it's a trend that like keeps going until the end of the Edo period. Awasera means to bring together and let's say, and again, like on two levels at least. There's first is about like bringing things together, and that can be man-made things like poems, for instance. Utawase is one of the typical formats for like poetic production and enjoyment. So two poets compete with each other. The left one, the right one, they both create a poem on the same topic, and then a judge praises its respective merits. But then we can have like seashells or even lotuses, like chrysanthemums. So it's like something that people do with dogs, maybe. So we bring one each, and then we decide which one is the best. So the production moment and the judgment moment are like brought together. And Takimono, of course, is one of the things that is like judged in this way. Also because the problem with perfume is they are hard to describe. We're going to discuss about that a bit later. So like having these again, a blending, a coming together of different like olfactory expressions means that they become verbal. They can be verbalized and so on. We don't have actual records of Takemono Awase from Heian, and we have later things from Muromachi that are probably influenced to like a later kind of like Ko Awase, in which just pure Jinko is compared. So, but we're talking about people that have their own recipes, and then they, by showing an excellent product, that not just they are like expressing their own subjective personality, their skills, and their access to like knowledge and materials. So we don't have actual records of Takemono Awase from Heian, but we have a very famous like fictional one in the 32nd chapter of Genji Monogatari, a plum branch, Umegae. And so what happens is that Genji's daughter is going to court, and eventually she become one of the consorts of the emperor. But like, so he's trying to like bring her to court with the best of the best. So she needs to impress. And one of the things that were needed to impress was, excellent Takemono. And so what happens? We're talking about like a midway. So it's like half of the novel. And Genji gathers all the women with whom he had different kinds of relationships. It's mostly erotic relationships, obviously. And each one of them has to prepare two blends. And so everybody is starting. So what's interesting in this scene is like really like midway in the novel. So it's a wrap up. And so these women are cooperating with each other and with Genji, but also competing with each other. So each one of them is trying to show who they are through the blend. And so one of them is writing a poem, in which she's using an olfactory metaphors to realize, that like she's kind of passing by gifting her perfume to his daughter. She's saying that it's about like she's like almost gone. She's not so young anymore, but she can pass on some kind of a refinement to his daughter. And then, it's a long description, but like each one of them, like eventually we're given a short description of each one of the scents, and each of the scents has a unique connection to their fictional characters. Each one of them is through her, the kind of Takemono that she's gifting, is telling something about her personality that would be very hard to sum up in words with the same kind of like conciseness. So, for instance, Sagao, the first one, gives a kurobo, a dark incense that was just the best, somehow gentle and yet deeper than the others. And then the prince Genji has a secret recipe that was supposed to be only transmitted to women. So he has this special access to this feminine world. And the lady of Orange Blossom, Hanachiro Sato, was reticent. She was reticent, as inconspicuous as a wisp of smoke from a censer. She's a shy woman. And Hanachiro Sato is a reference to the orange Chibana blossom before her house. So she's all about nostalgia, and so on and so on. And neither, in the end, the judge kind of hops out. So say, each one of them was excellent. And Genji's mocking him. Okay, this is a harmless sort of conclusion. So it's not really about winning each other, but these awaseru, this coming together, which has a competitive side, but also kind of genuine meeting. And here I'm quoting Yamagata as relatively. So he's talking about these arts of blending, these arts of kodo, these olfactory arts in Japan, and he's realizing that they are a bit paradoxical, because by taking language as an intermediary, olfaction, which is originally a direct sense, a sense of content, is expressed indirectly through the change of seasons, natural environment, human activities. Naming a scent by itself has no linguistic articulation. We employ metaphors, we compose poetry to transform it into an object. We transform into an object body, a captai, the scent atmosphere that lingers within the body of a living subject. But through this objectivation, there is always the effort to transform this scent atmosphere into expressive connection and common being. and have been together. I think it's a very good sum up this element. And how much time do I have left? Sorry, I'm not. 10 minutes? 10 minutes, not enough. So I'll skip this part, even though it's really interesting, because it's in the last 10 chapters, we have like the PNG is dead. We have these two like young noblemen. One of them is called Nyo, and the other one is called Kaoru. And these two words both mean scent. And they are completely complementary personalities dealing with, they have like one is brash, very central. The other one is like extremely reticent. Like his body has a natural perfume. So like has this like special atmosphere that like goes beyond himself, but he's extremely shy. He's kind of constantly retreating and receding. And the other one was obsessed by perfumes. So like he's jealous, like Nyo is jealous of him, or Kaoru, but also he's brash and extremely like aggressive. So they are. And my take is that they personify like the two main like phenomenological aspects of scent, which are displacement and condensation. So the Kaoru, the reticent one, the one who is receding constantly, is displacement. So scents have like this extremely peculiar thing of like being what is left when the thing is absent. So they can transcend time and space by being the kind of like sensual experience that the most closely connected to imagination. Because like, let's say the scent of chrysanthemum is what is left when the chrysanthemum is gone. But on the other side, we have condensation. So like scents are ignoring boundaries. Scents like bring together things that would be separated as discrete objects. They can bring everything together. They have these centripetal movement, which, for instance, Takimono is an example. Things from very different part of the world, things from like Asia, Africa, like the South tropical Asia, they're brought together, they become one, and in a place of indistinction. And so the whole problem, it's a thread, like the last 10 chapters really have like this like research quality. So like these two people, and then it become a triangle with different women. But they are basically the same. They are the incomplete aspects, like transcendence and like centripetal immanence. And they compete with each other. Somehow they really like each other, but they are also very unbalanced. And they are trying to find a way of completing each other that is never really reached. So that by the end, the last woman that they're trying to like have a connection to, Ukifune. So like first Kaoru is like trying to seduce her, trying to like chase her, even though she's just a substitution of her dead sister. So like Kaoru is constantly transferring something on somebody else. And then, but then Nyo, but using the fact that they kind of smell like each other, they have the same perfume. So he forces himself on her, and she's facing the decision, facing a choice between these two men. She cannot choose, and she tries to, she jumps in a river. So she wants to drown. And she's found by a Buddhist priest, she's amnesiac. So really, we're talking about memory. And she's by the end, one of the last chapters, she's composing a poem about ume, about plum blossoms, in which they two are completely mixed. So she doesn't remember them as discrete as two different people. He whose leaves brush mine is here no more, and yet it is here in the scent of the dawning of spring. But she doesn't know who they are. She doesn't really remember. And the two of them are mixed with each other. So let's say, what if at the beginning of the research, the Madeleine episode, so it's about an unconscious olfactory memory, but this is a failure of memory. So something she knows that we don't really know also if she's actually amnesiac or not. At one point, the narrator we start having an impression that she might be lying, and she just wants to to make things past, stay in the past. So this past needs to be lost. But she's trying to access her. This is the description of an unconscious memory. at least for us, like with modern categories. But at the beginning of the research, I mean, the Madeleine episode, first he has this like strong emotional reaction to the blend. And then he's trying to recollect and he finds it. So that the moment of memory is also like very, like it's a like happy chance. But most of these olfactory memories actually stay in an unconscious, in a non-propositional level. And so, and it's incredibly, I would say this is a textual place in which somehow, maybe we cannot call it unconscious, but for sure we have some kind of like embodied memory, embodied expression that is not surface into like distinct awareness. So maybe there's a bit more, but I have two more examples, but I don't have enough time for sure. But it's a bit later in Heian. So like what's central to me? So I'm talking about condensation and displacement, like so as phenomenological axis of olfactory manifestation. But then, of course, they are translations of the Freudian Verschiebung and Verdichtung. So, like, which for Freud are the two main operations of the unconscious, and in Lacan, for instance, they are also like Lacan is connecting condensation and displacement to the main axis of language. So he's like using Jacobson, but saying, well, basically, what happens in the unconscious when we have a condensation, we have a metaphor, the paradigmatic axis. What happens when we have Verschiebung, when you have like a displacement, that's a syntagmatic axis. It's metonymia. What's central to me, when we are discussing scent, we always need to rely on metaphors. So that there are perfumes fresh like the skin of infants, sweet like oboes, green like prairies, or we can say the scent is black, the scent is like plum blossoms. They are all metaphors, the things that are separated in space and time, kind of become one together. But we can also say it smells of chrysanthemums, it smells of roses, it smells of incense, which is what is left when a thing is gone. And this is like, interestingly, in Japanese, like nioi seems to be very much attuned, like it's mostly references to this metaphorical condensation. And kaori is mostly referred to what is gone, what is left. It's kind of like an unconscious memory. And it seems that like, am I over with time? Fine. Okay. So last 5 minutes. The last example is actually a funny one, but I limit myself to this one. So in Ega Monogatari, A Tale of Flowering Fortune, by the beginning, I mean, it's like it's a story of later 10th century nobleman. But by the beginning, we have this short episode concerning Emperor Murakami, which has like a big harem, let's say, like different consorts. And each one, again, like the women in Genji, they're kind of competing with each other for his attention. So he decides to send them this poem. 大阪も果てあゆききの関もいずれたぜねっといこきなばかりさじ。Since nobody remains in Osaka, where people come and go, pray visit me. If you come, you will not be sent back. Though they responded in various ways, only Kenshi sent him incense, proof, he thought, of their super sensibility. Such discernment was not one to have been expected at all, but a certain lady went so far to present herself at his apartment in a gorgeous attire. People say his regard for her cooled after that. So, what happens? And the author of Ega Monogatari is not even explaining. So, it was a well-known thing. So, for those of you who can read Japanese, try reading in vertical. The first kana, a, wa, se, ta, ki, and then the last ones, mo no skoshi, which translates. So, if I'm taking the first syllable on the left, and of course, I mean, it was vertical. It was top and bottom, but for us, let's say leftmost and rightmost. I have awaseta kimono skoshi, which means please send me some blended incense. And so this is an acrostic, which is relatively rare in as far as I know, it's relatively rare as a form or like cryptography in Japanese literature. But what is interesting is that so there's a literal meaning of like, oh, just come to me. So Osaka in the old spelling is Aosaka. So again, a meeting, an awase. And so one of them says, okay, he's inviting me, he wants to meet me in person, and she comes there with the gorgeous attire, and he completely loses respect for her or interest. And only one of them is realizing, oh, like this poem has a hidden meaning. The cryptography, of course, I mean, it's for us, it doesn't seem deep. So this kind of like encoding, but actually, for instance, it was very common in like throughout the like Mediterranean antiquity as well. Acrostics were often used in religious, like ethos, or in magic. So cryptography is one of the ways in which language can mean more than its literal meaning. So it's like it's at the core, like having double meaning, having this. So the first letter at the au is like awase and au. So it's the same word meeting, so coming together, like blending. The point of the poem is saying something that cannot be said in prose. So out of the organization of signifier and significate of signified and signifier, a poem is supposed to be, to use a metaphor, a perfumed word. So it's a word that's surrounded by a halo of ulteriority, or like to give off like an extra layer of expression that could not possibly be just expressing like just expressing in a literal way. So the point is not that he wants the takimono. The point is that he wants to say A, so come and meet me in person, while saying the opposite. So the hidden meaning here, like we have an acronym, but acronyms are like a very important symbol of this possibility of language of giving away, of hiding this ulteriority. So, and again, metaphors, metonymy, so all these, the fact that like scent is the non-linguistic sense par excellence, but at the same time, scent is like directly in its manifestation, non-linguistic, not because it's just like, it's an absence of language, but because it's based on structures, again, mostly unconscious structures that are genetic. Language itself arises out of a possibility of like organizing meaning through these like a level of ulteriority. And yeah, my last, so like, and I'm using, again, it's a double, so I'm talking about ambiguity and ambivalence. Because I have a few more examples in which it's not just ambiguity, of course, it's like this semantic sense, like semantic linguistic. But then we have like a ambiguity also means that just because it can never be representational. So it's expression in the sense of like something that goes beyond what we can grasp as an object, beyond what can be like aesthetic. So it's like it's both evanescent in the moment, but also like lingering in the past, like some kind of like the unconscious as something that like haunts us as a ghost. And so basically it's not just, so we're dealing with perfumes, no? So far, it seems very, very refined, of course, if we're talking about high culture. But even here, even in the context of Heian, sense as a real other, it's both something desired and extremely scary. I mean, we see a woman that has like chased but through kinds of perfume. She would rather die rather than choose. Or we have like, so every perfume smell has a dangerous stink within it. So if it's actually other, I never know if I like it or not. This is a Manyoshu poem, so we're talking about something even older by Yokimaru. And so, which is like it's a kind of poetry in which like he was supposed to use like a series of really strange words. So it's more of it seems like a meaningless play. Showing a close to the incense wrapped pagoda, you stinking slave girl, who is eating the shitty cart from the river Ben Privy. So like he's a nobleman from Nara. Like incense is coming, is very often smeared as a powder on like Buddhist in Buddhist edifices. So he's saying, so he's rich, he's got access to the continental culture, like very refined. So it's a place of refinement. And then he sees it's a slave girl. I mean, up to Heian, no, up to like the end of Nara, there were people that were like indentured servants. And she's eating like a smelly fish from and again, in a dirty place. He sees her and basically like chastising her to like, stay away, get away. But the problem is that each of these words in the original poem, that is a 2011 article by Palman, in which he argues very convincingly that each one of these words in the poem has a double meaning. It's like a dirty pun. And this poem is about male and female genitals, actually. So the pagoda means something, the smiley fish means something. And actually, Horu and Nureru. So basically, he's talking about being excited by these, like, very much. So this lower woman, the sting, it is disgusting in a way. I mean, perfume, which means good scent, and then like the stink, like it's the earth and the human body, the smelly fish. But they are also sexual things, and so we have these extreme tension between the two sexes, the higher and lower classes, the polarities, which then, of course, is resolved by laughter. But the point is that olfaction has this inbuilt ambivalence. So the poem, like this poetic expression, is one in which the two different meanings are held together in the same way in which the two like positive and negative value, like disgusting and appreciation, are held together in an actual order. And one last, like, let me know if there's one even like this thing I find it incredibly modern. But there's like a later, we're talking about Konjaku. It's a Heian story, but like about Heishu, Fujio Taira no Sadabumi, who's like a Japanese Don Juan. So these are not Latin law, the Japanese law. It's a womanizer. Like sometimes he's unlike Genji. It's not. Sometimes it's unsuccessful as well. He gets rejected. And one of the stories is in Konjaku Monogatari and Ujishu Monogatari. He gets obsessed. So these Japanese noblemen, sort of these like wannabe Genji, gets obsessed by this lady who's called Jiju. Jiju is one of the names of the 6 takemono blends. So she's named like, it means charm, her name, but also her name itself is like incense. And she's very, so he chases her, but she's not very non-committal. She answers politely, but she doesn't seem to be very interested. And so like one night is like raining a lot. And so I say, okay, I'll show up and be there. And she cannot deny me if I'm showing up like in a summer rain night. So he goes there and she makes him wait in a perfume shop. So first of all, there is this moment, and this is like still consistent with the general, it's a very, let's say, typical way of Heian seduction, which so it's all about the anticipation. So he's there. There was a most beautiful fragrance of burning incense. It was all very attractive. He experienced a thrill of pleasure as he's waiting for her. Then she comes and she seems to be available. Let's imagine a completely darkened room. So he can feel the fragrance of her hair. She leaves a robe. So like the typical like olfactory pose. And then you say, oh no, sorry, I forgot to close the door. So I need to close the door. And he shuts him outside. So he's still in the room, but like she basically gets back in the outer quarters. And so he's left in this perfumed room. She tricks him basically. And he gets mad. So like he gets extremely obsessive about her. Because I mean, like when she's using the perfume to make him feel her absence. So this would be still very much like in line with the general structure of Heian lovemaking, is the poetics of Heian lovemaking. But what happens is that he's getting so obsessed with her that he wants to fall out of love with her. And he thinks, I need to find something disgusting with her. So by the same age, I mean, it's we have people meditating on women corpses. Like it's some of the tales are in the same Vishui and Konjaku Monogatari, or from the same age, for instance, we have like Buddhist painting that depicts a beautiful woman getting sick and then eventually decomposing. So he has been denied access to her interiority. So, and he wants to like actually uncover what's inside her, because he thinks that the inside of the bodily insides might be disgusting. And he has a really weird idea. He wants to steal her chamber pot. So now one day, one of her servants is bringing away a very like a wonderful box with her poop and pee. So like he really likes it. And he steals the chamber. He steals the chamber pot because he thinks if I have access, which of course it's a sort of very indirect sexual violence. So she said no. She closed him outside, although he could feel the scent in the outside chamber, and he wants to get inside her one way or another. So like these fetishist violation. And what happened? It was wrapped into thick thickness of incense-colored material and gave off an exquisite fragrance. Indeed, as he unwrapped it, the fragrance was quite beyond description. The vessel was filled with a dark-colored decoction made with Alice wooden cloves. Also in it were a number of cylindrical objects made up from powdered incense. So like he opens the box and he discovers that for some reasons, she understood what he was going to do. And so instead of having external excrements, external excreta, she fashioned, again, this is a myth out there. So like she created something that like basically instead of like actual like urine and actual stool, she created the same things with like a perfume, Alice wooden cloth juice, and then this cylindrical object made up from powdered incense. If you remember the picture, the takemono is black and like a paste. So like it kind of shaped it could look like some kind of excrement. But what did this mean? How could anyone be so clever? Everything suggested that she was just not human. So somehow, I mean, like, even though this is like really crazy and far-fetched, she understood what he was gonna do, and she's done in advance. And this story, like I would say, oh, this is such a story from the Konjaku, Jushui. For instance, Akutagawa's first Heian mono, like very often he was using these ancient sources. And I was joking with a friend saying, oh, this looks like the kind of thing he might have used. I checked, and actually, yes, he did. So there's a Akutagawa story short story from 1921, which is called Koshoku, last, or translated as Heichu the Amorous Genius. In which like there's a very dramatic retelling. So the ancient source is like actually a bit more. He say, oh, he was embarrassed and very like annoyed by the whole story. And here he thinks that he's gonna die. So like for him, this is a moment that decides for his own life. Her waste matter is in here in my life too, because like he's so upset that he's gonna die. To forget her and to live an insignificant life, or to die with my memory of her captivating beauty. So like she, as a perfume, let's say, she's something I completely idealized, because she's obviously what's more out of reach than a perfume, cannot be grasped. But like by transforming the perfume in a stink and something disgusting, he hopes that he can be free. Live on, brace up, and live on. Look at her waste matter, and I'll be sure to triumph over her. And then, I mean, then he basically is announcing when he discovers that what she's done, and like even her excreta are perfume. He thinking, okay, he actually like, and there's a very graphic moment in which he tries to eat it, and then like he thinks, okay, he might as well die because he's been beaten. And there's a very interesting Lacanian reading, like so like this Katayama from this article 2005, in which he's trying to understand what's the meaning of this perfume and stinking box. So it's a bit of a Pandora's box or a Schrodinger's box. So what's inside in that moment before opening is both light and that, both stinking and perfuming. So it's ambivalence at its most. It is always already before us, like her, no? The place what's before us, what's like she knew already, and replace but that is assigned to the unconscious subjectivity of alternative to what has been repressed. So not just expression, but also repression. It is the locus of the other, in which what is repressed, the absence of our knowledge, and even more, the fundamental absence in our own being is encased. So like in dealing with olfaction with these ancient sources, I find extremely important to remind myself that there's this double structure of not just impermanence, but condensation and displacement as two like related opposite movements, and also dealing with something which is ambiguous and ambivalent. Well,
Alessandro? It's question. I was very hitten by a picture that you used at the beginning of your presentation, the one in which there are a little baby and a monkey.
Oh yeah. It's a one.
And I was thinking that there was an advertising for a soap, if I okay. And you in this picture, the link between the smell and the humanization of the little kid pass through the purification of the body, because the smell is connected with the soap. So you have to wash yourself for smelling good. But in the case of the incense, there is not this connection between smelling and purifying yourself or something like that. So you can smell of incense, but you can be not clean or something like that. So I don't know if you.
It's even more. So like it's one of the ingredients of like of course, I mean, I would be mentioned in the last thing. So like, so the incense looks a bit like poo, like a human stool. But actually, one of the ingredients is charcoal musk. So like, and musk, the deer musk, obviously. So like, we're talking about like a sexual secretion of an animal. And so like, we have zibet, stuff like musk. They were, and actually, so the Alain Corban is giving a really interesting description of how these animal scents were actually really the most precious and appreciated ones up to the French Revolution. So up to this bourgeois idea of toilette as, scent is for cleaning myself. So scented odorants are supposed to transfigure the human body. So it's hiding, but also like refining it at the same time. Whereas perfumes before, like were very sexual and scatological. So we're talking about, so like the idea that we need of like being like bodily clean is like an extremely recent construction in not in European history, let's say, or human history. So like incense, it is purification. So it's ritual purification for instance, let's say, of course, like especially, I don't know, sandalwood in a Buddhist context is supposed to be like a part of a ritual purification. In Indian sources already, like we have the god Indra creating a perfume chamber inside the womb of Gautama's mother, so that the enlightened one could get in this world without being corrupted by flesh. India, again, is not China, it's not Japan. But so the point is that, yes, there's a big difference between erasure of the body odor or incense is let's say it's a transfiguration that doesn't erase the connection to animality, scatology, and sexual. And again, scatological odors and sexual odors are deeply connected in all mammals. So that's one of like the first thing that makes us human, according to Freud, is really this like organic repression, so that the scatological and the sexual get separated and both repressed. And if you think of the behavior of a baby, I mean, even before teaching like an infant how to speak, parents need to very aggressively say, that's dirty, don't get that in your mouth, don't do that, because babies, since they're mammal infants, they have an instinctive attraction for, let's say, just strong smells. So incense has, like takimono at least, has a very strong connection to animal odors as well. So the last scene, of course, has to be understood also with the connection, like an element like musk makes them like actually very close to an animal odor. It's a blending also between the animal and the plant, like and the non and living matter, animal matter, and plant matter. Thank you.
Just a simple question. At the beginning, you talked about commercial deodorize, how it kind of destroys the sense of that's covering up, camouflaging, hiding. Then you went into these competitive fragrance meetings, right? What people type. And that seemed to be more natural, more in touch with more refining the sense of smell, whereas the one represses it. But in fact, these things are high levels of abstraction because they remove it from the natural environment in which the smell takes place. And it's not sort of coming in common with nature, it's manicuring nature in order to romanticize it. So there seems to be implicitly a kind of comparison between, people using deodorants and taking baths on the one side, and then on the good side, we have people getting together to compare smells for poetry. But in fact, they're both abstractions, aren't they?
No, if it came across that way, there was a problem with my presentation. Because when I'm talking about deodorization, I'm using paradoxical and paranoid. I mean, paranoid is, of course, I'm thinking, but paradoxical also means it can only fail. So we will never stop smelling, first of all, even people that get very aggressive towards their own body, they will smell forever. And also deodorization also means like lots of perfuming, lots of deodorants, lots of it's a big industry. So it's about the ambivalence, even in modernity. So the point what I can say is negative because it was essential in the colonial mindset. So othering the poor, othering the women and people with psychiatric issues, othering indigenous culture because of deodorization. I chose this one with the monkey, but there's from almost the same age, we have a white boy teaching a black boy how to wash, and the black boy becoming white. So it's really the whitening. So the ideology of whiteness is an ideology of cleanliness and deodorization. In this sense, is it bad? It's affect, yes, for sure they are. But it doesn't mean it's coherent, or it doesn't mean that it's just about erasing, because it cannot be. Saying yes, no. I don't think the Heian aristocrats were really in touch with nature. But this is not about me. There's a beautiful book by Shirane Haruo, Japan and the Culture of the Four Seasons, in which is immediately showing how these again, the seasons are a kind of like a calligraphic space. It's a coming together, but coming together doesn't mean it's natural. No, we're talking about, and also how, let's say, if you want, it's really unnatural also to bring these little pieces of wood from countries that never visited ever. So even having access to these meant the geographic access to things like ginkgo or Byakudan sandalwood meant also an aristocratic connection to very different spaces and even times in the case of Buddhism. So it was an appreciation of nature, but
but it's kind of a disinfected nature, and I think that's a problem that continues to exist in Japan today.
Mhm.
That people can get in their car and drive an hour and write waka or practice smells, and then get in their car and drive home and think they've communed with nature when they've polluted it for 2 hours. in order to have an hour of a class about nature. And that's got a long history behind it. And I don't think it's bad, disinfecting nature, extracting it. But I think there's another side to it that has to be looked at. And it's very much like this Freudian unconscious thing you talked about.
It's a sublimation, it's a sublimation, it's displacement.
Yes.
Yeah, so when I was quoting Yamagata here, I'm using the medium of expression. So, because of course, in poetry, there is let's say, even especially waka is a good example, no? So it's all about nature, but it's from people that at most were accessing it through a garden.
Yes.
And it's supposed to be all about emotions, and it's extremely formulaic. So like they're quoting, like they keep quoting, it's like an extremely complex structure of like inner quotes and so on. They're constantly referencing even the Ukifune poem. I mean, she's quoting Kokinshu, the other, like the very famous
I don't
one.
think there's anything critical about the arts. My problem is when it's used for ethical purposes or used to blind people to what's really happening to nature. And that's become a situation much more critical today than it was beyond Japan.
I mean, I'm closing with the two, actually, I mean, I'm in the chapter, the Okimaru poem about the pagoda and the carp is at the beginning of the chapter, and the Heichu story about like an incense, which is at the same time an excrement, are in the end, because I keep trying reminding to myself and the reader that perfume is like a way of trying to sublimate something which is very ambiguous, very ambivalent. So we don't love it. We love and hate it. So like in the same way, so people need to have this idealized version of nature because we also hate it. Like the exposure is a very stressful exposure. And like, especially, I mean, we're talking about aristocrats. They were living in a bubble. And so like they're having an outside world that was ugly and messy and full of doro, full of mud. It's a muddy world. I mean, same with sexuality. I mean, like it's all about indirect enjoyment of something that could also be very animalistic. So ambivalence for me, it's like a really important category, not just dealing with like reading of sources, but to understand, let's say, even phenomenologically, so that the linguistic and conceptual, let's say there's an ontological ambiguity, it becomes an emotional and even ethical ambivalence. Two are absolutely connected. So yeah, they hated nature in a certain sense, which we all do.
Because nature hates us.
Yes, it's very aggressive, and even the fact that a person can be bliss, but it's very impermanent. So like we can experience bliss, and then it's just for a moment, and then in order to like access that together, we need like a very abstract and very symbolic order to say, oh, it's like the spring of all times. This is full of nostalgia and so on. But of course, there's a frustration in having a non-natural system to access something that seems so immediate.
Okay, thank you much, Lorenzo. I think it's time to close the morning session.